And this is why we have this particular day, so that we make sure that within each and every organization, there's somebody that is paying attention to this small detail. It may look like a small minor detail, but it is actually quite important, especially when it comes to the internet, because if the service is meant to grow, to develop, then we need to be able to route it in a more efficient way. So, is there really anything positive happening in this region? I'll say yes, and I'll use an example of KIXP. I happen to work there, so I took some time earlier this year to analyze what is going on. And I was actually quite impressed by what I saw. In July 2010, when I looked at the old data, I saw that there were more Kenyan AS numbers than there were external AS numbers visible at the KIXP. And there were slightly over 15 AS numbers, external AS numbers visible at the KIXP. That was July 2010. In January 2011, however, there were actually the same number of external ASs equal to the same number of ASs that are local to Kenya. So meaning that there was a growth of both local AS numbers as well as external AS numbers. Meaning that there are people coming to peer and interconnect at the exchange point in Kenya over that period of 6 months. So this made me realize that in actual sense something is happening. The only significant thing we can notice within that period of time is that we actually held a peering forum in Nairobi in August. So it's a sign that the people who actually came to the event or who are aware of the event did learn something or did pick up something and try. And when we go into the detail of which AS numbers were actually there, you will see that, you know, we had a few AS numbers from Uganda, a few, one or two from Rwanda and Tanzania, Zambia and Zimbabwe. But this number increases in terms of the number of AS numbers from Uganda. We even have as far as Mozambique showing up, Ghana showing up. So it means that people are actually looking at regional interconnection at this point in time. So we just need to improve on it and make it better. Now, the challenge we will face, though, in trying to measure this particular data is that it's inaccessible. As I mentioned earlier, just by looking at the graphs in terms of aggregate data of traffic being exchanged at the exchange points, we're only able to get about 11 exchange points out of the 22 that exist. Now, imagine getting more data in terms of how many AS numbers participating at any given exchange points, and looking at the detail of, you know, where the origin of those ASs are coming from. It's actually quite difficult. Earlier on, for those who are here for the AFNOG Day, you saw the presentation from John Kemp from the Route Views project. And for me to be able to collect this data about KIXP is because there's an archive of route views, the route views dumps being done for the last 5 years at KIXP. So I can actually dig the data all the way back for the last 5 years and see what's the growth of AS numbers looking like at the KIXP for that period. Now, from the information given by John Kemp, there are only 2 route views in Africa, in Johannesburg and Kenya. So the rest of the exchange points in the region, we really cannot be able to get that level of detail or data to be able to, you know, have an overview picture of what's happening with regards to their local interconnection and also their regional interconnection. Even more interesting is that if there's a tool that Mark Tinker is going to speak about called the peering database, if you try to look up any network operator at the peering database from Africa, you find that they actually don't list there. And it's a tool that's widely used for people to put up information with regards to where they peer and so on and so forth. So with that type of information missing, then it means that there's very little data we're able to get about the region and what the network operators are doing. And they, in my opinion, they tend to fall under the category of where I say network operators in Africa are bandwidth floggers. They just resell bandwidth, and that's all they are. So at the moment, we are trying to start some discussions in what I'm calling the ARP project, and this is just me, and I'm trying to sell this idea to many people as much as possible. The ARP project basically stands for African Route Views Project, is to try and push out a few route views boxes or instances or setups or whatever you choose to call them into exchange points in Africa. And the objective of the route views boxes will be to basically collect data, and data that people can actually be able to see, easily view. At this stage, we're trying to scope out how do you make a route views be more valuable. Currently, if you are at the presentation that was given by John Kembali in the week about the route views, basically you'll see the way it works is that it does a dump of the BGP table, show IP BGP summary, show IP BGP routes, and does that in a format called MRT. And those files are stored on the they're accessible on the route views FTP archive. So you can download that, and then you need to take some scripts and run the scripts against these MRT files. Then you get a plain text file, and then you can use that to go to Team Kumru's ASN database, or use some other RIPE NCC's database to match where the origin and the destination of the AS numbers is. So it's sort of like you have to write your own code to be able to get the data that I was presenting about KXP earlier. I remember it took me about a day to figure out that the tools that they had on the route views didn't actually work for me. And so I tried to reach out a few people that I know and ask them, do these tools really work as they say they should? And they said, well, they'll only give you up to this point, and then beyond that, you're on your own. So, but I happened to come across some folks who had time, and they wrote a bit more code, and I was able to get the data that I showed earlier about KXP. So it was really a lot of work. I spent almost a whole day trying to figure out how best to analyze the data quickly without having to manually count every ASN and look it up individually. Plus, I don't write code, so that doesn't work in my favor. So, how do we make it easier for the exchange point operators who don't write code like me, and they need to analyze this data, and many other people who might be interested in this data that don't write code, or don't even know somebody who might understand what exactly they are looking for. So that's what was the motivation that drove me and a couple of other people to see what we can do with the ARP project. So at this point, we're still in the discussion phase. We need to write a concept paper and sort of define what we want to see out of a route views box. For me, it will be beautiful if I have a route views box that I log in with a username and password and just click and see, oh, this month we've added 2 new AS numbers, and these 2 AS numbers came from these countries, and this percentage was local and this percentage was international. I mean, that is useful information for somebody like me who spends a lot of time speaking about exchange points. So number of prefixes, how many prefixes are visible at an exchange point, what percentage of them is IPv4 and what percentage is IPv6. That kind of thing will be useful for us going forward to just monitor, and it makes makes the region look visible. It makes the region become more attractive because there is data that people can use to build business case for. So I think it's a valuable thing. Why am I speaking too much about this? Well, first, because I don't know all the features you like to see. So if you have feature sets that you like to see, when you come to an exchange point in Africa, what are you looking for? And if this data can be collected using the dumps that the route views can do, then we are happy to integrate this. So I'm opening up. Please email me and tell me the features you like to see. As I'm writing this document, the project scope, I'm able to incorporate these feature sets in, and then we have volunteers so far to write the code. And we have volunteers. The Route Views project has agreed to get us the boxes. And we'll develop the code. If you don't like our boxes, you get the code and install it on your machines, on your network, and it will basically be able to provide you with this set of data. So it's a project which I think will be useful going forward. We hope to prototype it at the KXP this year and roll out once we're happy with everything and that everything works well next year to the other exchange points in the region that will be interested. So that to me is like a next step going forward with trying to understand what's really happening in the region. So I think that brings me to the end of my updates for the peering and interconnection in status in the region. I won't talk much about the exchange points. You already know what status the exchange points are in. Nothing much has changed in the last 6 months. So I'll go straight into the other bit of peering coordinators. What's the role of peering coordinators? Well, by definition, I think I like to start at the question of what is peering. Peering basically is voluntary interconnection between networks that wish to exchange traffic between their customers' networks. And peering comes mainly in two forms, or rather, there are two types of peering agreements. The settlement-free or fee-based peering. We tend to see a lot more of settlement-free-based settlement or free peering taking place at exchange points around the world. But if you go to other places, depends on the peering policy. Two types of the forms of which peering takes place physically. It's either private peering or public peering. In public peering means that you go to a facility like an internet exchange point, and this is where you'll find public peering. Often it's free. Of course, there is a levy charged by the IXP operator for the function and service. But basically, to peer with other members at the exchange point, it's often free. There's also what is called private peering. This you will find, and this is where the aspect of fee-based peering will often come up, because it's private peering. You want to peer privately outside a shared fabric, outside an exchange point. It's either a point-to-point or within an exchange point, but they have private interconnects, as they call them, so where you can actually exchange traffic with a specific operator or network. So it may be fee-based, it may not be fee-based. We will look more into the details of how these peering commercials take place in later presentations today. So you can look out for that. What would drive somebody to go into a peering, a paid peering versus a settlement-free peering? So why do people peer is another question which most networks will ask themselves. Now, the reason I have this slide on is because having spent a lot of time, especially in East Africa, I talk to a lot of network operators, and I still see that the ISPs in East Africa especially, and Western Africa as well, tend to not peer outside the region, just within their country, and when they go outside, everything is transit. So the question is, why is it that they always go for transit? And so there are a few reasons that you want to peer.